Have you ever had a season in your life where it felt like everything just went quiet? Like the phone stopped ringing, the opportunities dried up, the friendships you counted on started to drift away. Maybe you felt like you were standing in the middle of a room that used to be full of people, and now you're the only one left. And the silence was so loud, it was almost unbearable. If that's where you are right now, I want you to stop and take a breath. Because what I'm about to share with you just might be the most important message you've heard in a long time. That silence you're sitting in, that's not abandonment. That's not failure. And it is absolutely not the end of your story. That silence is God preparing a stage. And you, my friend, are the one He's preparing to walk onto it. Today we're going to talk about something that most people misunderstand. Something that the church doesn't preach on enough. Something that looks like a setback from the outside, but is actually one of the most powerful signs of God's favor you could ever experience. We're going to talk about the season of isolation, the hidden season, the season where God pulls you back before He launches you forward. And by the time we're done, I believe with everything in me that you are going to see your situation in a completely different light. Let's start with the most honest question we can ask. Why does it feel like God has gone quiet? You were praying, you were faithful, you were showing up, doing the work, trusting the process, and then one day it just felt like the ceiling went up 1,000 feet and your prayers were bouncing right back down to the floor. Doors that used to open for you started closing. People who used to champion you started pulling away. And you started wondering, did I do something wrong? Is God punishing me? Did I miss my moment? Here's what I want you to understand. Those questions are completely natural. Every single person who has ever been called to something greater has asked those exact same questions. You are not alone in your confusion, and you are not alone in your pain. But here's what's also true. The way we interpret a season determines whether we grow in it or get destroyed by it. If you believe the isolation is punishment, you will spend that time in shame and self-doubt. But if you understand that the isolation is preparation, you will spend that time being built into something extraordinary. God has never once abandoned one of His people in a waiting season. Think about one of the most beloved stories in all of Scripture. The story of a young man named Joseph. Joseph was the son of a man named Jacob, and from the time he was young, Joseph had a dream. Not just the dreams you have when you're asleep, though he had those too. Joseph had a vision. He had a sense deep in his spirit that his life was going to count for something, that he was going to lead, that he was going to impact people, that God had a hand on his life in a significant way. And then his world fell apart. His own brothers turned on him. They threw him in a pit. They sold him into slavery. He was taken to a foreign country, stripped of everything familiar, and handed off like livestock to a man named Potiphar. Now, if you are walking through a hard season, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Joseph did not end up in Egypt because he made a bad decision. He did not end up in chains because he was being punished for something he did wrong. He ended up there because God was building something inside of him that could not be built in the comfort of his father's house. You cannot become who God has called you to be in the same environment that produced who you used to be. Sometimes, God has to physically relocate you, relationally isolate you, and circumstantially disorient you. All for the purpose of getting you to depend on nothing and no one but Him. And just when things looked like they might be turning around for Joseph, just when he had earned trust in Potiphar's house and begun to rebuild, things got worse. He was falsely accused. He was thrown into prison, and the one person he helped, the one connection that should have gotten him out, forgot about him for 2 full years. 2 years. Can you imagine the emotional weight of that? You did everything right. You kept your integrity. You served with excellence. And nothing happened. The door stayed shut. The season stayed hard. But here's what the Bible tells us in the middle of all of that. It says, "And the Lord was with Joseph." Right there in the prison, right there in the pit, right there in the forgotten place. God was with him, not watching from a distance, not checking in occasionally. Present, active, working. And that is the single most important thing you need to hold on to in your season of isolation. God has not left the building. He is right there with you, and He is working even when you cannot see it. Now let's talk about something that is incredibly practical, because understanding that God is present is one thing, but understanding what He is actually doing in the waiting is what will give you the strength to stay in it. When God isolates you, He is doing something in you that He cannot do around you. Think about that. There are things that God wants to build in your character, in your faith, in your inner life that require stillness. They require the removal of distraction. They require that the noise of the world, the opinions of others, the constant stimulation of activity and busyness and comparison, all of that has to go quiet before God can do the kind of deep work that the next season of your life demands. You see, many of us are so afraid of silence that we fill every single moment with noise. We turn on the TV the second we get home. We scroll through our phones the moment we wake up. We make sure there is always something, always someone, always some activity to pull our attention away from the one thing that God is desperately trying to get us to do, which is to just be still and know that He is God. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is where God speaks. And here is the thing about what God wants to say to you. He has things that are specific to you, not a general pep talk, not a vague spiritual feeling. He has direction. He has instruction. He has revelation about your purpose, your assignment, the next step He wants you to take. But those words cannot compete with the volume of everything else you're carrying. So sometimes He just turns the volume down on everything else. That is not punishment. That is love. A loving father who sees that his child is overwhelmed by noise will sometimes create an environment of quiet, not to make the child suffer, but to make it possible for the child to actually hear. Now, I want to bring this to one of the most powerful examples in all of the Old Testament, and that is the life of Moses. Moses grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler on earth. He had access. He had influence. He had resources. He was positioned at the very top of the most advanced civilization of his age. And if you had looked at Moses at age 30, you might have said, "This man is ready. He has everything he needs to do great things." But God saw something different. What Moses had in resources, he lacked in character. He was impulsive. He was not yet someone who could bear the weight of leading an entire nation. And so God did something that must have felt devastating to Moses at the time. He allowed circumstances to unfold that sent Moses running away from everything he had built, away from Egypt, away from power, away from influence, away from everything he knew. Moses ended up in a place called Midian, and he stayed there for 40 years. 40 years is a long time to be in the wilderness when you know you were built for a palace. But here is what happened in those 40 years. Moses learned patience. He learned humility. He learned how to lead, not because of position or power, but because of character and calling. He became a shepherd, which is one of the most patient and self-sacrificing roles a person can hold. And in doing so, God was using the ordinary to prepare Moses for the extraordinary. And then one day, Moses was doing his regular thing, taking care of the sheep, minding his business, probably not even thinking about Egypt anymore. And he saw a bush that was burning but was not being consumed. And out of that bush, God spoke to him. God did not speak to Moses in the palace. God did not speak to Moses in the crowd. God spoke to Moses in the wilderness. On a regular Tuesday, in a moment of ordinary life, when Moses was alone and available and present enough to notice something unusual. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. God shows up in the ordinary moments of your isolation and says, "I've been waiting for you to slow down enough to hear me. And now that you're here, let me tell you who you really are and what I've really called you to do." Moses went from the wilderness to leading one of the most significant deliverances in human history. But he could not have led that mission without the wilderness that came before it. The wilderness was not a detour. The wilderness was the road. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that I think a lot of us experience in our seasons of isolation but don't always have language for. And that is the feeling that God is taking things from us rather than giving things to us. Here is what I mean. In your season of isolation, you may have noticed that certain relationships started to fade. People who used to be constants in your life became distant. Opportunities that once seemed sure started to close off. Maybe even some habits or routines or identities you had built your life around started to feel hollow or unnecessary, and it can feel like loss. It can feel like God is stripping things away. And honestly, He is. But here is what you need to understand. When a gardener prunes a fruit tree, the tree does not look better immediately after the pruning. It actually looks worse. It looks bare, exposed, cut back. But any gardener worth their salt will tell you that pruning is not destruction. Pruning is the very action that creates the conditions for greater fruit. God is not pruning you to hurt you. God is pruning you because He sees the fruit that is coming. He sees the next season. He sees what the branches that He's removing are costing you in terms of the capacity you need for what's ahead. Sometimes the relationship that has to go is one that is subtly draining you in ways you haven't fully noticed. Sometimes the opportunity that closes is one that would have taken you down a path that looked good but was not God's best for you. Sometimes the identity that feels like it's being stripped away is one that was never really yours to begin with. It was who others expected you to be, not who God actually called you to be. The pruning is not cruelty. The pruning is customized care from a God who loves you too much to let you stay smaller than what He designed you for. Now, let's talk about what I think is one of the most misunderstood aspects of this whole thing. And that is the question of timing. Because here is what I hear from people all the time. I understand that God is preparing me. I know this season has a purpose. But how long? How long is this supposed to last? When is it going to be over? I want to be honest with you about this, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. I do not know how long your season of isolation will last, and anyone who tells you they do is probably not being straight with you. But here is what I do know. God's timing is not random, and it is not cruel. His timing is surgical. He knows exactly what needs to happen inside of you before the next door opens, and He will not move you before you are ready, not because He doesn't care about your pain, but because He cares too much about your future to let you walk into it unprepared. Think about it this way. A seed that is planted in the ground does not sprout in a day. It sits in the dark. It sits in the quiet, and while it looks like nothing is happening from the outside, everything is happening on the inside. The roots are forming. The structure is taking shape. The capacity to hold the weight of what will eventually grow above ground is being built in the hidden, dark, silent place. You are that seed right now. And the fact that you cannot yet see what God is growing does not mean nothing is happening. It means the work is happening underground, in the hidden places, in the places where roots are built. Here is what I want to ask you. What if, instead of asking God how long, you started asking Him what? What are you building in me right now? What do you want me to see about myself? in this season? What do you want to say to me in the quiet that you couldn't say in the noise? What character trait do you want to develop? What wound do you want to heal? What fear do you want to address before I step into the next level? Shift the question, and you shift the experience of the season. I want to spend some time now talking about a truth that I think will encourage you more than almost anything else in this message. And it is simply this: you are not the first person to walk this road. Every single person who has ever been used significantly by God has had to walk through a season of isolation first. Not some of them, all of them. David, before he ever wore a crown, spent years in the fields alone with his sheep, talking to God, learning to trust God with his life before he was trusted with the lives of others. And then, after he was anointed as king, he spent even more years in hiding, running from a king who wanted him dead, waiting for a promise that seemed like it was never going to come to pass. But in the waiting, David wrote. In the waiting, David worshiped. In the waiting, David learned to pour out his heart to God in ways that have comforted billions of people across thousands of years of human history. The Psalms were born in David's isolation, the songs that you sing in your darkest moments. Many of them came from a shepherd boy who was hiding in a cave and had nowhere to turn but up. Your isolation is not just about you. What God is building in you in this season will one day be a lifeline for someone else. Your testimony is being written right now. The story of how God sustained you, how He showed up in your darkest moments, how He was faithful when nothing made sense. That story is going to set someone else free. That story is going to be the word that someone else needs to hear when they are sitting in their own cave, wondering if God has forgotten them. Hold on to that. What you are going through is not just for you. It is for everyone your life is going to touch. I also want to address something that I think is critical, and that is the temptation to try to get yourself out of the isolation before God is done with it. This is so real, because when you are in a hard season, the natural human response is to find a way out. You start networking harder. You start forcing doors. You start reaching for any opportunity that appears, whether it is from God or not, just to get the season to end. You start making decisions from a place of desperation rather than a place of wisdom. And I understand that impulse. I really do. When you're hungry, you don't examine the food that carefully. You just eat. And spiritually, when you are starving for movement, for change, for progress, you can grab onto things that are not meant for you just because they showed up and offered relief. But here is the danger in that. When you step out of the preparation before the preparation is complete, you step into the next season without the tools you need to handle it. And blessings without preparation are not blessings at all. They are burdens that will eventually break you. Joseph could have compromised his integrity at multiple points in his story. He could have cut corners. He could have manipulated circumstances to get himself out of prison faster. But he did not. He stayed faithful. He kept serving. He kept his character intact, even when it cost him. And when his moment finally came, it came so completely and so powerfully that in a single day, he went from the prison to the palace. That kind of elevation cannot happen without that kind of preparation. Stay in the season until the season is done with you. Trust the process even when the process is painful. Keep your integrity even when it feels like your integrity is costing you. Because God sees, and God is keeping a record, and the same God who promoted Joseph will promote you. Let me bring this tour to close by talking about the most important practice you can have in your season of isolation. And that practice is simply this: seek God's presence more than you seek God's answers. This is counterintuitive. When we are in hard seasons, our natural impulse is to come to God with a list of questions. Why is this happening? When will it end? What do I need to do to fix it? And those questions are not wrong. But if that is all you bring to God, you will often leave the conversation more frustrated than when you came in, because sometimes God does not give us the answer. Sometimes what God gives us is Himself. And here is the thing about that. His presence is actually better than the answer. Because if God gave you the full picture right now, if He showed you every detail of what He is building and exactly when it is going to come to pass, you would not need faith. And faith is not just a means to an end. Faith is the foundation of your entire relationship with God. A faith that has to be tested is a faith that can be trusted. A faith that is never stretched is a faith that is never strong. In the quiet of your isolation, God is not just building your future. He is building your faith. He is building a depth of trust in Him that will be the foundation of everything that follows. So when you come to Him in this season, come with an open heart instead of just an open list of questions. Say to Him, God, I do not understand what you are doing, but I trust who you are. I don't know the timeline, but I know your character. I can't see the way forward, but I know you go before me, and you will never leave me behind. That kind of prayer is not resignation. That is power. That is the prayer of someone who knows that the God they are talking to is not indifferent to their pain. He is intimately acquainted with it. He entered into it Himself through the person of Jesus, who spent 40 days alone in the wilderness before stepping into His purpose. If the Son of God needed a season of preparation, we should not be surprised that we need one too. So let me close with this. If you are in a season of isolation right now, if the silence feels heavy and the waiting feels long and you are tired and you are questioning, I want you to hear this directly and clearly. God has not forgotten you. God has not abandoned you. God has not changed His mind about you. He is not withholding from you as punishment. He is protecting you as preparation. The silence is not the absence of God. The silence is the sound of God working. The isolation is not the opposite of your destiny. The isolation is the road to your destiny. And the best is not behind you. The best is being built in you right now. In the hidden place, in the quiet, in the waiting, in the season that feels like nothing is happening, but where everything that matters is happening. Stay faithful. Stay surrendered. Keep seeking His presence. Keep nurturing your character, even when no one is watching. Keep serving where you are planted, even when you feel like you are planted in the wrong field. Because the harvest is coming, and when it comes, when the season of isolation gives way to the season of elevation, you will not be a person who just got lucky. You will be a person who was built for it. A person whose roots go deep enough to hold the weight of the blessing. A person whose character can sustain what their talent attracted. A person who knows, beyond any shadow of doubt, that the God who brought you through the wilderness is the same God who will walk with you into the promised land. Hold on. Stay strong. Trust the process. The blessing is on its way, and it is going to be greater than anything you can imagine.